After 6 years apart, a millionaire CEO discovers the incredible life of his ex-wife selling CHUR. Mark Lancaster stared at his computer screen, the vibrant colors of a local arts and crafts market dancing before his eyes, like a cruel reminder of all he'd lost. Memories of Lisa flooded back, her laughter infusing the space around them like a warm embrace. She was flourishing, running her own small business, and it nodded him. He'd traded their dreams for boardroom goals, but the unexpected discovery of her name ignited a flicker of something he thought long extinguished: desire, regret, and a keen sense of inadequacy. In his high-rise office, surrounded by glass and chrome, the world felt sterile. The successes he'd collected like trophies whispered hollowly in his ear. Internal pressure mounted, each little victory serving as a heavier weight instead of a reason for celebration. Was this what success looked like? He sifted through spreadsheets and quarterly reports, questions stacking on top of each other like dominoes waiting to fall. Jealousy bubbled within him as he imagined the life Lisa had chosen, one filled with creativity and passion. Her spirit was alive, while in the corporate world he felt like a ghost. But a crisis was brewing back home. Share prices dipped, and whispers of dissent among the board were surfacing. The company he'd painstakingly built from the ground up was now on shaky ground. What would he sacrifice, a burgeoning empire built on ambition, or the vestiges of the love he'd once held dear? The duality crushed him. Before he could fully process the implications of reaching out, guilt surged. Turning back to the screen, his mind raced. If he connected with Lisa, what did that say about his priorities? Would he be rehashing old wounds, or worse, opening new ones? A lump formed in his throat. The thought of encountering her again stirred up dread and longing in equal measure. But then he imagined her laughter, the sheer joy that sparked as she created. His heart seized at the contrast, her vibrant chaos versus his calculated sterility. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With that, a plan brewed, an impulsive desire to reacquaint himself with who he once was. Armed with flowers, he walked toward the market where he feared and hoped to find her. Anxiety gripped him as the stalls filled his view. The colors, the sounds, the palpable community connection. It all seemed foreign, yet deeply attractive. What kind of life had she built for herself? More importantly, what lay buried within him waiting for resurrection? As he approached her stall, the setup looked so inviting. She was radiant, captivating customers with her charm, and suddenly he felt his armor crack. Would she even remember him? Would she view him as the man who fled their life for profit? The doubt knotted his stomach. Tension brewed inside of him, an inner battle between nostalgia and the unyielding reality of his corporate life threatening to drown him. And when Lisa turned, recognition blossomed in her eyes. Flickering hope lit amid his tumultuous thoughts. Would he have the courage to confront his past and the life choices that put a chasm between them? The moment Lisa's eyes met his, time felt suspended. Mark's heart raced and his hands gripped the flowers tightly, moisture gathering at the edges of his palms. He could discern a mixture of surprise and warmth in her gaze, yet fear tethered him to the ground. Would she see the mismatch between them, a juxtaposition of exuberant chaos versus sterile ambition? Her smile sparked a memory of more carefree days. But what weight of apology would follow that smile? "Mark?" she uttered, disbelief lacing her voice. The name felt foreign, and yet achingly familiar. I brought these for you," he stammered, thrusting the flowers forward, a poor attempt at breaking the ice. I saw your stall and wanted to see how you were doing." The words tumbled out, riddled with sincerity and irony. Lisa took the flowers gently, inspecting them, as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "They're beautiful, thank you." "I didn't expect," she trailed off, and silence filled the space between them, thick with years of unspoken history. In that silence, Mark felt the full weight of his choices, the corporate ladder he had climbed at the expense of personal fulfillment, the fervor that Lisa had always pursued and yet he had let slip away. It gnawed him. Watching the way she interacted with her customers, a natural warmth radiated from her. Among the smell of paints and the sounds of laughter, she flourished, and in doing so, it exposed his uphill battle against the monotony of his own life. "Can I help you with anything?" she asked, her enthusiasm undeniable, sparking a tinge of envy within him. He hesitated. "Actually, I wanted to talk. Maybe we could grab a coffee." Her expression momentarily shifted, revealing the glimmer of suspicion mixed with curiosity. "I'm not sure what you'd want to discuss." "It's been 6 years," he interjected, desperation coloring his tone. "I just need to understand everything. I need to confront my past," and something flickered behind her eyes. Was it concern or intrigue? "Why now?" she probed, her voice steady, but he could sense the vulnerability beneath the surface. "I guess I'm just tired of hiding," he confessed, surprising even himself with the rawness of his admission. He was a man on the verge of a breakdown, a millionaire, yes, but richer in should-haves and regrets. Her shoulders relaxed, and the intensity of their moment swirled into something more tangible. "Then let us talk." They walked to a nearby cafe, the vibrant market retreating behind them, until they were seated at a small table tucked against the wall. Outside, people swarmed, laughter mingling with the scent of fresh coffee. Yet their conversation became a microcosm. It was just the two of them, the world around fading away. Mark found himself navigating the depths of vulnerability he had avoided for so long. He shared bits of his life, obfuscated by ambition, and though it pained him, he needed her to understand what choices had led to their estrangement. Lisa listened, her face a canvas of emotion, sympathy, hurt, but there was something else, strength. "I built this business to reclaim my passion," she finally said, her voice laced with determination. "You chose profit over those dreams we had. I don't hold that against you. But what are you doing now?" The question pierced through him, forcing an assessment he had long avoided. Was he still chasing success for its own sake? As he looked into her eyes, he realized he wasn't pursuing fulfillment anymore, but merely running from his failures. "I don't know," he admitted, feeling exposed. But as Lisa continued sharing her story and the struggle she faced, Mark felt an ember stirring within him, a strand connecting to who he used to be, where he had belonged. Her narrative tempered his feelings of inadequacy, igniting a tentative spark of ambition he thought had died. But amid their shared stories, he sensed an impending shift. He could either hide behind his past or forge a new path. The realization that he had to actively choose his direction loomed ominously over their conversation. Would he have the courage to embrace the uncomfortable truths, face the corporate world that had shackled him for too long, and, ultimately, decide whether to reconnect with Lisa on a deeper level? As they finished their coffee and prepared to leave, Mark's mind was buzzing with possibilities. He sensed an impending change, a pivotal moment where the past and future collided. "Mark, I don't want you to feel like this is just a walk down memory lane if you're not willing to act," Lisa said, her expression serious. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both. Would this confrontation awaken him, or would he retreat into his world once more? This made him question everything. What was left for him if he forfeited this second chance? Could he redefine success with her in his life? The uncertainty enveloped him, and the truth began to unfold. His journey back to authenticity was just beginning. As they stepped out of the cafe, The sun caught the edges of Mark's reflection in the glass door, obscured by the worry etched across his brow. Lisa walked ahead, her presence steady and unwavering. Each step felt laden with unanswered questions. Shadows from their past crept close, merging with the vibrant energy of the bustling market. "Did you mean what you said about needing to act?" Mark finally called out, the words rushing out in a burst of urgency. He hoped to grasp onto that ember of ambition kindled within him. The words stirred a fresh resolve. Lisa turned, her mouth slightly agape, as if the weight of his sincerity had caught her off guard. "It felt like you were seeking a truth today, but do you have a plan?" Mark struggled to find an answer, the mind racing with fragments oscillating between clarity and confusion. A plan? How could he articulate a coherent course of action when he himself was still untangling threads of his regret? The walls he'd built around himself felt taller than they had moments ago. "I don't have a plan," he admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. This admission came not from defeat, but from a place of raw honesty that felt liberating. "But I want to find one. I need to reevaluate everything." Without missing a beat, Lisa stepped closer, her gaze intensifying. "Then you have to commit to that reevaluation actively. It won't just happen because you want it to." Her words hung between the two of them, urging him to challenge the inertia that had pulled him back into the folds of his secure, but stagnant, life. The corporate empire he had built, with its gleaming edges and shiny results, stood in stark contrast to the spontaneous and colorful creativity that had once been theirs together. "Maybe I can help you find that plan," Lisa offered with a hint of warmth. "But only if you're all in. It's time to dig deep and confront what you've been avoiding." That little flicker of hope ignited into a flame, but it did little to dispel the heaviness in Mark's chest. The thought of peeling back layers of defensiveness, of revealing vulnerabilities, filled him with trepidation. What if he unearthed truths that made his seemingly secure life feel insufferable or, worse, meaningless? "Let us meet again," he insisted, his tone more resolute. "Just to talk, but with intention. I want to create something real and fulfilling." Her expression softened. "I appreciate your honesty. Maybe we can make this a real exchange, not just a nostalgic conversation?" "Yes," Mark replied, his mind swirling with the complexities of what moving forward meant. They exchanged numbers, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things lingering in the air. As they departed, Mark's thoughts spun. He envisioned an agenda, a strategy that covered both the emotional and practical facets of his life. He needed to reconnect with the core of who he was, balancing ambition with authentic fulfillment instead of allowing fear to dictate his decisions. That night, as he sat at his desk surrounded by the cold remnants of his corporate life, he scribbled down thoughts and ambitions, feelings he had buried for years. Each word represented a commitment to change, a step toward understanding himself beyond titles and bank accounts. An unexpected resolve took root within him. The comfortable confine of his current existence began unraveling. Who was he outside of his success? This question inspired a montage of actions, reaching out to old friends, pursuing personal interests he had shelved. The concept of that struggle no longer felt like a burden, it appeared like a necessary evolution. But amidst this newfound clarity, another fear surfaced. What if pursuing authenticity forced him to confront the uncomfortable truths of his character? What if success meant relinquishing all that he thought he wanted? A new conflict stirred, pulling him between the desire for stability and the unmistakable yearning to break free from self-imposed chains. The unanswered questions coiled tighter around him as he gazed out at the city landscape, feeling the grandeur and loneliness of it all. As Mark put pen to paper, heart racing at the idea of taking these first steps toward rediscovery, his phone buzzed abruptly. It was a message from Lisa. "Let's keep it real this time, Mark. In that spirit, when can we meet again?" The screen lit up with potential, yet also with the enormity of the choice before him. Would he accept the challenge and strive to craft a life that embraced both passion and determination? The exhilarating unknown lay just beyond his reach, and with each beat of his heart, the truth resonated louder. The journey was just beginning. Could he embrace the chaos of possibility that loomed ahead, ready to transform every piece of his life from mere existence into an exploration of joy? With a mix of anxiety and excitement swelling within him, he typed back, "Tomorrow?" What would this commitment reveal about his past, and could it lead him to the future he so desperately sought? At breakfast the next morning, Mark made a conscious effort to visualize his meeting with Lisa. He brewed some coffee, allowing its rich aroma to fill his minimalist kitchen, but his mind was preoccupied with self-critical thoughts. He had been so focused on corporate metrics and projections that he struggled to determine what his personal metrics for fulfillment might look like. What did success really mean to him? As he poured the coffee, he contemplated his past choices, recalling the confidence he had once felt pursuing passion projects alongside Lisa. The ambitious man he had become in pursuit of profit now felt strangely detached from that creative spark. It gnawed at him, showing unmistakable signs of wear on his soul. As he settled into the day, a sense of urgency gripped him. He found himself scrolling through his contacts, stopping at Lisa's name. Memories flooded back of days filled with adventure and laughter, moments he desperately wished to reclaim. Would embarking on this new journey, diving headfirst into vulnerability, rekindle the essence of who he once was? Noticing the minutes slipping away like grains of sand, he pushed aside any doubts. The remnants of his corporate world, a glaring whiteboard filled with KPIs, and annual reports seemed pathetic in comparison to the prospect of genuine conversation and possible rebirth. The decision felt necessary, but it remained daunting. Arriving at the cafe, he felt the familiar rush of emotion as he saw Lisa already seated. She was absorbed in a book, the sunlight framing her figure in a way that momentarily stole his breath. This was not the moment to be swept up in nostalgia. He was there to forge paths into uncharted territories alongside an old partner. As he approached her table, he greeted her with a smile that held both warmth and uncertainty. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, slipping into the seat across from her. Lisa looked up, her smile genuine. "I'm glad you're here. Ready to dive in?" Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her question. "Honestly, I'm a bit overwhelmed," he confessed, his voice slightly trembling. The admission felt both terrifying and relieving. "I've spent so long managing a facade of success that I've lost touch with parts of myself that truly matter." "Then let us peel those layers back," Lisa encouraged, leaning in. Her eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm that felt contagious. "What has been bothering you the most?" This question sent a shiver down Mark's spine. He hesitated at first, but as Lisa waited patiently, he began to unravel the tightly wound thread of his self-perception. "I crave authenticity," he admitted, grappling with the implications of his words. "But I fear the emptiness of my accomplishments might drown me." Lisa nodded, appearing deep in thought. "What if we flip the narrative? Instead of seeing your work as a hollow success, what if you view it as only part of your journey?" Her insight struck him with a clarity he hadn't expected. Gradually, a sense of relief replaced his earlier anxiety. He began to grasp the essence of the conversation they were about to embark upon. "I've lost sight of my creativity," he confessed, leaning into vulnerability. "The passion I once had feels buried." "Then let us find it together," she said softly, each word holding promise. "What did you love doing when you felt most alive?" Mark swallowed hard, his mind racing to embrace old memories. "I used to write stories, scripts. I wanted to create narratives that moved people." An idea began to bloom. Maybe I could start there. Find a way to express those feelings through writing as a project. "Now we're talking," she beamed, encouraging him with a nod as if she were watching his confidence resurface. But as the excitement filled the air, the shadows of doubt crept in. Could he really pivot from the corporate titan he had become to the vulnerable creative he yearned to reclaim? Or would the facade cling to him, ultimately leading to more internal conflict? The conversation flowed into new territory, filled with potential that felt tangible yet elusive. The fear of confronting those shadowy aspects of his past flared again. What if he couldn't meet his own expectations? "So, Mark," Lisa said, her voice breaking through his spiral of thoughts, "when's your first writing session?" The question hung heavily in the air, becoming the pivotal moment of reckoning. He felt the tension of commitment wrap around him like a noose. Would he take the leap? "Tomorrow," he replied, and this time the word was less of a question and more of a declaration. The significance of that decision compressed the air in the cafe, imprinting a sense of anticipation into their conversation. But as they moved ahead, Mark couldn't shake the anxious thought. Would this pursuit lead him back to joy, or further expose an emptiness he'd finally have to face? Tomorrow awaited, promising the birth of something new. But with it loomed the nagging uncertainty: could he weave together the strands of his past into a future he could thrive in, or would he end up confronting a void that had been waiting to be acknowledged? A new path was unfolding, but it felt precarious, teetering at the edge of unknown revelations. What tumultuous truths lay hidden beneath the surface that he was yet to confront? Mark paced the floors of his apartment, the walls echoing the heartbeat of his growing anxiety. Tomorrow marked his first venture back into writing, a desperate attempt to reclaim the creative vitality that once defined him. Each tick of the clock reminded him of the promises he'd made not just to Lisa, but to himself. The thoughts raced through his head, dancing between confidence and self-doubt, spiraling into an internal dialogue that threatened to consume him. He could almost see the blank pages awaiting his words. What if the stories he wanted to tell were lost forever? The fear of inadequacy stirred restlessly within him. He recalled the nights spent hunched over his laptop, fingers poised above the keys, immobilized by the fear of what spilled words might reveal. Inviting Lisa back into his life had ignited a flicker of hope, but it also unearthed the intense fear of failure. Was he really capable of transforming his thoughts and experiences into meaningful narratives? Or would they simply dissipate into echoes of non-fulfillment? He needed structure, discipline. Yet, he had been programmed for years to chase numbers, not emotions. Mark took a seat at his desk, opening a journal he had tucked away for years, its pages often untouched. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight as he flipped through the remnants of his forgotten creativity. A few half-finished poems, musings, the ghostly whispers of a passionate past. With every line, he could sense an unfamiliar but compelling urge tugging at him, guiding him towards rediscovery. What if he approached his writing with the same aspirations he had in corporate settings? The methodology, the discipline, these could be recalibrated into something beautiful, something authentic. Could he convert those metrics of success he had once obsessed over into a rubric for personal fulfillment? Satisfaction would be his new measure. As he pondered this shift, something unexpected happened. An idea for a story began to form, a protagonist's journey mirroring his own, a character grappling with the dichotomy of corporate ambition and creative yearning. Mark laughed softly, the first sign of ease he had felt all day, infused with the intoxicating thrill of possibility. It was as if the universe conspired through his memories and his conversations with Lisa to propel him toward a rebirth. Between bouts of inspiration, Mark began to map out a plan. Tomorrow's writing session wouldn't merely be a free-for-all. It needed structure. He sketched out a writing schedule, defining specific times and themes to explore. Would it be too ambitious to think he could complete an entire page in a day, or perhaps two? He dismissed the negative thoughts. This was a new beginning, and the only way to succeed was to step into it fully. That evening, he set the stage. He cleared his desk of corporate memorabilia, replacing it with reminders of the joys he had once felt. A small sketchbook from college, a few art supplies, a stack of blank notebooks waiting to be filled. His apartment transformed from a sterile office into a sanctuary for creativity. With dusk falling, and the city lights flickering to life outside his window, Mark revisited his thoughts on authenticity. He had spent so many years dressing up his profession in layers of corporate polish, shielding his vulnerabilities behind success stories and projections. Now he was peeling those layers back, bearing the truth of who he was beneath the ambitions. The morning would bring new challenges, and the promise of exploration. Perhaps Lisa would provide feedback that could sharpen his writing. She had always been his most insightful critic, after all. A thread of excitement coursed through his veins, inspiring several ideas ready to be unleashed at dawn. Suddenly, a penetrating thought struck him. Would she still see the man he was hoping to become, or the one who had succumbed to the relentless world of corporate obsession? This revelation, lurking beneath the surface, was both exhilarating and terrifying. He felt a clarion call to confront not just how he viewed creativity, but how it interfaced with his relationships. As he prepared for bed, he couldn't shake off the apprehension lurking in his gut. Would this path allow him to resurrect not only his passion for writing but the connections he had swallowed whole in pursuit of success? With uncertainty looming, he finally drifted into a restless sleep. Next, he would face the canvas of possibility with an ink-stained heart. Would his first words flow freely, or would they shatter him with the weight of undiscovered truths? The dawn brought answers, but what would they reveal? As the first rays of dawn streamed through the window, Mark awoke with a mixture of anticipation and dread. His heart raced as he sat up, piecing together the remnants of his restless night. He blinked at the daylight, wondering if it could illuminate the obscured path he had long neglected. The ticking clock counted down his minutes, as if challenging him to transform his thoughts into tangible words. He quickly dressed, feeling the fabric of his clothes remind him of the tension drawn taut in his muscles. As he brewed his morning coffee, the rich aroma filled his apartment, spurring a sense of urgency. Today was about more than writing. It was about confronting the parts of him he had locked away, the parts he feared would be underwhelming and unworthy. The desk, now a blend of inspiration and chaos, awaited him like a jury ready to judge his every word. Trembling slightly, he opened the computer, its screen glowing like an invitation to unravel hidden truths. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys, grappling with the familiar tremor of self-doubt. Was this merely an indulgent exercise, or could he truly voice his thoughts in a way that resonated? He inhaled deeply, recalling his pledge to approach writing with newfound discipline. Each word he penned would breach the divide between corporate success and artistic expression. Mark recalled his favorite authors, those brave souls who had boldly chronicled their inner turmoils. Could he embody that same spirit? Could he be courageous enough to lay bare the contours of his own vulnerabilities? His fingers finally danced across the keyboard, and he began to write about the protagonist's struggle, a character caught in the throes of ambition yet yearning for authenticity. As he poured his thoughts into the narrative, memories flooded back. Events that had once felt like burdens became the heartbeat of his story. With each passage, he felt more connected to his voice, illuminating parts of himself long suppressed. As the words flowed unimpeded, Mark noticed that the tension in his chest slowly dissipated. He had feared this endeavor would highlight his weaknesses. Instead, it gifted him with clarity and purpose. He allowed himself to stay vulnerable in the narrative, comforting the frailty that whispered he was not enough. The fear that gripped him now transformed into a silent companion, urging him forward. His phone buzzed, breaking his concentration. It was a text from Lisa, catching him off guard. "Excited to hear about your writing today. Remember, honesty is what resonates." Her encouragement, though brief, felt like an anchor in the tumultuous sea of self-doubt. He realized that sharing his journey with her might foster not just growth in his writing but also in their relationship. Renewed by her message, Mark scribbled a note to himself in the margin of his notebook. "This is not just about the writing, it's about renewal." The insinuation of that realization marked a shift inside him. What if he approached his writing session as a dialogue with Lisa, an opportunity to bridge the gap that had formed in their years apart? Could he invite her into the narrative in a way that showcased his growth and desire to reforge their connection? Nesting this transformative idea in his mind, he increased his tempo, delving deeper into the exploration of his character's life choices and conflicting desires. A plot twist began to develop, reflecting the latent possibilities he saw in his own life. Yet, another question lingered. If he were to open up to Lisa about his creative ambitions, would she see his vulnerability as a weakness? The risk of rejection loomed large. It could shatter the fragile hope he felt. But what if facing that fear became the narrative's most compelling arc? As he crafted the concluding lines of his morning session, the fabric of excitement and anxiety intertwined. His heart raced with both enthusiasm and the impending uncertainty of sharing his work with Lisa. Each keystroke connected him not only to his protagonist, but to his own journey of self-discovery. With a sense of accomplishment swelling in his chest, and the first draft on the screen, he paused. The fear loomed over the returns he might gain from this undertaking, both in terms of his writing and his relationship with Lisa. Though terrifying, facing that fear directly could lead to unforeseen revelations in both aspects. He took a breath, contemplating his next steps. Could he prepare himself for the inevitable sharing of his work? What would Lisa's feedback unveil about not just his writing but also the evolution of their connection? The answers were as murky as they were tantalizing. But one thing was clear: he stood on a precipice of promise. With trembling resolve, Mark squared his shoulders and set a goal for the day: to finish the first draft and reach out to Lisa. The moment had come to confront the hurdles that held him back for so long. For here, in this new beginning, he discovered his greatest story yet to be told. Mark's fingers hovered above the keyboard, a battle between anticipation and trepidation waging inside him. He couldn't shake off the gravity of his decision to share the rawness of his writing with Lisa. Every word typed felt like a step onto uncharted territory. Would he be burying himself deeper in insecurities, or finally break free into a realm of honesty that felt so beautifully compelling? He took a moment to recall his past discussions with Lisa, conversations often laced with laughter and understanding. It wasn't only the nostalgia that pulled at him. It was the urge for a connection that had been buried for far too long beneath the weight of their separation. How many times had he wished to rekindle that camaraderie? Perhaps by inviting her into his current journey, he could rewrite their narrative in a way that honored both their paths. Drawing a deep breath, he resolved to add a layer of complexity to his protagonist, inspired in equal parts by his own struggles and the remnants of his life with Lisa. He envisioned a character who mirrored his ambition yet faced setbacks that echoed his own. The dualities of desire and fear now danced together in his mind, blending into an intricate plotline that was rich with tension and vulnerability. Mark leaned back in his chair, watching the blinking cursor as if it were a portal to a world where he could confront not only the obstacles of his fictional characters, but also the fears that had stalled his own growth. He recalled moments when Lisa supported him during tough times, helping him to breathe new life into his aspirations. What if he could channel that very spirit back into their lives? He returned to his draft, the words now a lighthouse guiding him through fog. The protagonist faced trials that revealed profound truths about identity and acceptance. Mark dared to mirror his own dilemmas within these pages, formulating questions about how ambition could sometimes lead one away from authenticity. What had he truly sacrificed on the altar of success? The sun climbed higher, spilling warmth into his workspace, emboldening him further. With each line, he felt himself shedding layers of the past that had restrained him. No longer would he limit his narrative to the confines of corporate conquest. He resolved that the climax would incorporate a moment where his protagonist faced the fear of vulnerability head-on, a chance to open up to someone important about passions and aspirations that had long been stifled. Yet mingling with this excitement was an unsettling reality. The inevitable moment he would share his draft with Lisa was creeping closer. What if she looked at him with disappointment, or worse, with indifference? The very thought sent a tremor through him. But he clung to the narrative arc he was constructing, willing to embrace discomfort. He crafted passages with intention, allowing the weight of his revelations to reflect clearly in the protagonist's journey. These snippets of text became a mirror, revealing hidden motivations that had shaped both his character's and his own life. In doing so, he slowly conquered the crippling fear with which he had long been intimate. As he approached the completion of his draft, a thrill surged within him, a sense of empowerment that had eluded him for years. The act of creation was transforming him. He realized he was not only writing a story, but also reclaiming parts of himself buried under layers of doubt and insecurity. But just when he thought he was ready, a single thought rose to the surface, wrestling with his newfound resolve. Was he ready for the magnitude of vulnerability he was preparing to unveil? And more importantly, how would the act of sharing this with Lisa shift the landscape of their relationship? With a mix of exhilaration and anxiety, he typed the final words: "To truly live is to embrace the fear of being seen." He leaned back once more, his heart racing at the thought of what would come next. The time had come to face not just his fears, but the reality of their shared past. How would Lisa respond to this unfiltered version of himself? Would this encounter fortify their connection or scatter the remnants of their history in a bitter breeze? Holding his breath, Mark stared at the screen, contemplating the next steps that loomed before him. The stakes had never felt higher, and the real journey was yet to unfold. Mark closed his laptop with a resolute click, the sound echoing through the otherwise quiet room, a sharp punctuation to the frenetic thoughts swirling in his mind. He was acutely aware that he stood on the precipice of change, yet beneath his anticipation festered a deep-rooted anxiety. The prospect of sharing his work was not just a professional step. It was an intimate unveiling of the man he had become after years of solitary striving. He decided to take a walk, hoping the crisp air would clear his mind. The familiar streets felt both comforting and alien, an odd juxtaposition that mirrored his internal landscape. Children laughed as they played, couples strolled hand in hand, oblivious to the tumult inside. Mark took a deep breath, intending to ground himself in the present. It dawned on him that while he grappled with insecurities and self-doubt, life moved on around him, vibrant and unyielding. But today, he was not just a former CEO grappling with self-worth. He was an author on the brink of sharing a piece of his soul, a product of every experience that had shaped him. Each step felt deliberate, as he reflected on the direction he wanted both his life and his work to take. This was not merely about reviving a connection with Lisa. It was about confronting himself, reclaiming his identity. As he paused to watch a group of joggers pass, he thought about his protagonist. The character faced obstacles not unlike his own: fear of vulnerability, the pull of ambition, and the search for authenticity in a world that often demanded conformity. Mark had crafted an ending that promised catharsis, but it also required introspection both for the character and, inevitably, for himself. His thoughts wandered back to past encounters with Lisa. The small cafe where they once exchanged whispers over steaming cups of coffee felt like a lifetime ago. He recalled her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm whenever he spoke of his dreams. What had happened to that version of themselves? Life had scattered their paths, but now the decision lay before him. Would he risk bringing those fragmented memories back into the light? Refocusing on his current trajectory, Mark realized he had a choice. He could keep his writings locked away, preserving them in a bubble of safety, or he could dare to expose his vulnerabilities by confronting Lisa with his truth. The latter choice fluttered tantalizingly at the edges of his mind, an invitation to revise their narrative. With his confidence spurred by newfound resolve, he headed back home determined to refine his approach. He envisioned drafting a letter to accompany his manuscript, expressing not merely his intent to share words, but his desire to reestablish a connection that had been fractured by silence. This would be his first act of vulnerability, a tangible step toward healing the past. Returning to his desk, he opened his laptop again, his fingers flying over the keys, as he began composing the letter. He spoke to Lisa through the screen, acknowledging their history, expressing his appreciation for the years they had spent apart. He wanted her to understand how much she had influenced the evolution of his character and, by extension, his journey. In that moment of focused creation, Mark uncovered an epiphany. This was not merely about seeking Lisa's approval or rekindling an old flame. It was about liberation from the weight of unexpressed truths, a crucial act of self-affirmation. He was ready to confront not just Lisa, but also any demons from their shared past. As he clicked send, a rush of adrenaline coursed through him, signaling not an end, but a beginning. He had no way of knowing how she would receive it, or if this would lead to the reconnection he yearned for. What he did know was that he had chosen a path toward authenticity. Yet, as the email vanished into cyberspace, unease snaked its way back into his consciousness. If he was prepared to share his narrative, perhaps he also needed to reconcile the version of himself that had chased success at all costs. Would uncovering those hidden aspects of his journey strengthen both his relationship and his self-worth, or ultimately unravel the newly woven fabric of his identity? There was no turning back now. The ground felt unstable beneath him, the journey truly beginning. Mark's heartbeat quickened with the realization that each choice, each moment of honesty, would shape not just his story, but the man he wished to become. Would this opening act of vulnerability open the door to a new chapter, or would the weight of the past threaten to pull him back? The uncertainty hovered in the air, thick with potential, as he braced himself for whatever lay ahead. When Mark awoke the next morning, the sunlight poured through his window, casting gentle patterns on his walls, yet it felt heavy. The email to Lisa loomed over him like a specter, a reminder of the risk he had taken. Conversely, this also marked the beginning of something transformative. Was he ready for the fallout, or worse, the silence? He busied himself with breakfast, but his thoughts strayed back to his manuscript. The protagonist's journey mirrored his own in ways he hadn't fully comprehended until now. Mark realized he needed to develop a clearer narrative arc, one that represented the complexity of both success and vulnerability. His fingers itched to draft new sections, but a sense of foreboding anchored him. The truth was he was peering into the abyss not just of his writing, but of his life decisions. An idea struck. He could explore his past choices more deeply through his work. What if he included a subplot reflecting on the motivations behind ambition? He could confront the gnawing question of whether success had ever truly satisfied him. The allure of climbing the corporate ladder had blinded him to the meaningful relationships, like the one with Lisa, that had given his life depth. With renewed determination, Mark opened his laptop, his heart racing as he typed. Each word became an introspective inquiry into the man he had been and the man he wanted to be. He articulated the protagonist's fear of loneliness, the unrelenting climb he had undertaken, believing success would fill the void left by personal connections. The deeper he plunged into the character's psyche, the more he uncovered about his own. As the morning turned into afternoon, he penned a powerful scene where the protagonist re-examined a pivotal moment in his life, a time when he chose work over an important relationship, a choice all too familiar for Mark. The writing flowed like a cathartic release, each sentence liberating yet binding him to the realities of his past choices. Slowly, clarity emerged from the chaos of his thoughts. He realized he had an obligation not just to his characters, but to himself. If he wanted to understand his journey, he must confront the realities he feared. There were no easy answers, but the act of writing itself fortified him, bookending his doubts with newfound self-awareness. He paused only when his fingers began to ache, reviewing what he had crafted. It was at that moment a notification pinged through Lisa's response. His heart raced, a cocktail of dread and excitement coursing through him. Should he read it now or wait? Was he ready to confront whatever lay within her words? Against his better judgment, he clicked on the message. Her words bloomed across the screen, laced with curiosity and warmth. Although she was happy to hear from him, apprehension played beneath her expressions. She mentioned her admiration for his courage to share his journey, yet she hinted at wanting to know more about their shared past, and what had led him to this very point. The floodgate had opened, spilling forth layers of emotions he had concealed for years. Mark felt stripped bare, gripped by the fear of exposing too much, yet buoyed by the prospect of authenticity. Would this be enough to repair what once felt irreparably fractured? He sat back, wrestling with his thoughts. His professional success had always felt like an isolated island. Could it now be a bridge to rekindle connections? Or would it deepen the wounds of their past? As his mind raced, a new understanding crystallized. Mark must integrate the lessons learned from both his narrative and his life. What he had neglected in his climb was the very essence of living the connections that breathe life into success. With that gripping realization, he knew the time had come to respond, not just to Lisa, but to the lessons hidden within his own words. How would he frame this new chapter? The blank email page stared back at him, waiting for his thoughts to shape it anew. A moment of hesitation flickered. Could he be brave enough to share his own vulnerabilities in real life as he had crafted for his protagonist? With a deep inhale, he began to type. What would emerge from this act of openness? The answer lay intertwined with his unfolding journey, a journey that was gaining momentum and heading towards an inevitable reckoning. What direction would it take from here? Mark sat back and took a deep breath, contemplating the whirlwind of emotions that had enveloped him since he stepped back into Lisa's life. After an entire week of reflections, creative expression, and reconnection, he felt an intense sense of clarity settling in. He was ready to forge ahead, no longer burdened by the weight of regret or fear of judgment. The journey he had embarked upon was not just a rediscovery of his passion for writing, but also a liberation from the shadows of his past choices. The morning sun streamed through his office window, flooding the room with light. Today felt different. Today, he was not just a fading image of a corporate executive, but a burgeoning writer ready to unveil the truths he had fought to keep hidden. He crafted a new email to Lisa, infusing it with the essence of his recent growth, the courage to confront his past self and share not just a narrative, but the core of who he had become. Lisa, he began, allowing the words to flow from the depths of his heart. It's taken me some time, but I realize our past is not just a collection of memories, but a foundation for a future we can co-create. I've reflected on my choices and the impact they've left on us. I can no longer separate my ambition from my authenticity. With each sentence, he felt the layers of detachment peel away, revealing the honest sentiments he kept buried. As he wrote about the transformation, he felt a dance between vulnerability and strength. He recognized how each word bridged the gap between their past and whatever lay ahead. Mark paused, his hands resting momentarily on the keyboard. The mere act of sending this email felt monumental. It was more than an account of his journey. It represented a shift, a commitment to transparency. He pressed the send button, releasing his thoughts into the universe, ready to embrace whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a profound sense of purpose. The stories he crafted had blossomed into a collection of narratives reflecting his newfound understanding of both success and fulfillment. Early every morning, he sat at his desk, fueled by the joy of bringing untold stories to life, the works of art he had once been too afraid to create amidst the furor of corporate ambition. Then, another email arrived from Lisa, and his heart raced with anticipation. Her response was just as transformative. She expressed excitement about his growth and inquired about his recent work. But what struck him most was her willingness to reflect on their past together and how it had shaped their present. It became evident that Lisa also sought to understand and share her journey, wanting to intertwine their paths once more. In their subsequent exchanges, their conversations grew deeper, weaving together laughter, shared memories, and emerging dreams. They acknowledged the mistakes that had led them apart while embracing the lessons they cultivated separately. Mark could see the fortitude in her spirit, a strength rooted in her own pursuit of creativity and authenticity. One sunny afternoon, they decided to meet for coffee at their old haunt, the same cafe where they had once talked for hours. As he walked through the familiar streets, he felt a sense of excitement, tempered by the bittersweet nature of nostalgia. The air hummed with the possibilities of new beginnings, and he could hardly contain the mix of anticipation and hope. When he entered the cafe, Mark spotted her at a table, her laughter ringing like music as she engaged with the barista about an artisanal blend of coffee. She looked radiant, exuding the vitality he had long admired. And there it was, that same spark from years ago, the smile that made his heart race. "Hey there," he greeted warmly, pulling out a chair across from her. "I'm thrilled to see you." "Same here, Mark. I have to hear all about your writing journey," she responded, leaning in, eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. As they exchanged stories and buried their fears beneath layers of laughter, Mark realized something remarkable. The process of sharing not just stories, but personal growth had transformed both his life and theirs. Each interaction with Lisa reminded him of the beauty of authenticity, the connection that could thrive when one could truly embrace vulnerability. The conversation shifted seamlessly from laughter to introspection. They cultivated a renewed understanding of each other, as Mark opened up about how writing had empowered him to confront his past, revealing the lessons hidden in pain. Lisa, in turn, shared her experiences of navigating her own business while fostering her creativity. Through honesty, they both achieved a breakthrough in their relationship. By acknowledging their shared history yet refusing to be defined by it, they were crafting a new narrative, one rich with possibilities and grounded in authenticity. By the end of their meeting, Mark felt a sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for years. Not only had he achieved clarity about his creative identity, but he also discovered a rekindled connection with Lisa that filled the void he had felt for far too long. This was progress, measured not in corporate accolades, but in emotional competence, the kind that opened doors to genuine happiness. As they parted that day, promising to meet again, Mark knew he had taken a monumental step toward becoming not just a better writer, but also a better man. With renewed confidence, he embraced the journey ahead, ready to explore whatever life had in store. With a smile on his face and stories to tell, he stepped into the future armed with the understanding that true success is woven from passion, connection, and the courage to share one's truth. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that could catalyze your own transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, because your support fuels these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear what you think. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because every moment spent in hesitation is a moment you won't reclaim. You can make a difference in their journey today.